Welcome. Today we're going to be going through the entire relationship of Katniss Everdeen and Peeta Mellark in the Hunger Games franchise. Katniss and Peeta grew up in fundamentally different households, and this shapes the way they deal with later relationships. Katniss grew up in a loving household in the poorest part of the Seam. She was incredibly close to her father, who taught her how to hunt with a bow and arrow, how to swim, and how to sing. Katniss' similarity to her father is mirrored in the way that Peeta Mellark's father, Mr. Mellark, talks about the Everdeens. Mr. Mellark explains to Peeta that he once wanted to marry Mrs. Everdeen, but that she ran off with a coal miner, but that he understood because when Mr. Everdeen sang, even the birds stopped to listen. Later on, when Peeta hears Katniss sing in class, even the birds stop to listen, and he is enraptured with her. When Katniss is 11, her father dies in a coal mine explosion. And after her father died, her mother fell into a deep depression that left her incredibly neglectful of her two children. In order to keep her family alive, Katniss had to build on from the hunting skills that her father had taught her. She had to learn how to kill and how to trade in order to feed them. She then meets Gale, and they trade knowledge of hunting and snares in order to help each other's families survive. And it's because of this and this experience that Katniss starts to view relationships as transactional. She knows that if she kills a squirrel and gives it to the baker, then he will give her a piece of bread. She knows that for everything that Gale teaches her, she must teach him something back. The only person who Katniss does not have this type of relationship with is her younger sister Prim. From the age of 11, Katniss's entire worldview is centered on survival. She finds school uninteresting because it won't help her bring food to the table. She never tries that hard to make friends, and even seems oblivious to the friends that she does have, like Madge, because in her mind, they never gave each other anything of value, so they must be nothing more than acquaintances. The first time that Katniss actually considers that Madge might be her friend is when she gives Katniss the Mockingjay pin before the reaping, essentially giving her something, putting something into this potential friendship. Peeta, on the other hand, grows up very differently. He was raised in the nicer part of District 12, but in an abusive household. His father is described as kind, but implied to be a bit of a pushover, and his mother is known to have beaten him, as well as likely his two older brothers. He is someone who notices everything, because he has learned from growing up in a household where physical punishment was held over his head like a sword, that he must always be on high alert, that he must always be ready to read people and their emotions. Peeta essentially learns to become a chameleon, to blend into the ideal version of what a person would want him to be. Both Katniss and Peeta had to take on adult responsibilities when they were children, but whereas Katniss did it because she had no other choice, Peeta was forced into physical labor by his parents, specifically his mother. Both of Katniss and Peeta's worldviews and philosophies are incredibly highlighted in the scene with the bread. Katniss is 11 years old, and she's just lost her father, and she's starving, and she's scavenging for anything to eat by rifling through garbage cans. And then a young Peeta Mellark, who may not understand the intricacies of this situation, purposely burns some bread and gifts it to her. Peeta knows that he is going to be punished for this, but he does the good thing anyway. Katniss views this as Peeta saving her life, and she feels that she owes him for this. Then they're 16 years old, and Prim is reaped for the arena, and Katniss immediately volunteers. And then Peeta is reaped for the arena, and his brothers stay silent. I would call the first book a performance for them. When they go into the first games, Katniss cannot understand Peeta at all. She's in an incredibly foreign environment, and her senses are on high alert, so she's essentially training herself to view everyone as a potential enemy. When Peeta starts crying at the reaping, she thinks it's maybe a manipulation tactic in order to get sponsors. When he admits his love for her in the interview, she attacks him because she thinks that he portrayed her as weak. Katniss is not a dumb protagonist. She can correctly recognize that Peeta is very good at manipulating a crowd and almost fits into this world of politics and intrigue at the Capitol, but she is blind to the reasons why Peeta is doing all of this. Because when Katniss was reaped and visited by her family and Gale in the Justice Building, all of them believed that she could win. They convinced her to fight and to want to come home. Whereas when Peeta is reaped and visited by his family in the Justice Building, his mother tells him that she essentially believes that Katniss can win. She fully expects to never see her son again. From the moment the train leaves the station, Peeta is riding on the belief that Katniss can win the Hunger Games. And he spends the entire time, both in the week of prep and training as well as in the arena, trying to help her in any way that he can. We know that Peeta voices this to Haymitch, their mentor, because together they plot ways to help Katniss without her knowledge. They plan Peeta's love confession for the interviews, knowing that it will help the otherwise quite disagreeable Katniss from getting sponsors. And Katniss hates this because she's a survivor and a fighter, and she was proud to get an 11 in the judging sessions because it highlighted her combat skills, and the idea that she could be reduced to nothing more than a love-struck girl is humiliating for her. Then they go into the games. Katniss is a survivor and Peeta is a chameleon, and these skills that they learned from childhood trauma are ultimately what help them in the arena. When Peeta joins the career pack in the games and starts hunting Katniss, she assumes that he has turned on her and that she needs to kill him first. All thought of potential kindness has gone out of the window for Katniss. And although it is understandable as to why Katniss would think this is what Peeta's doing, it's not what he's doing at all. We know that Peeta has always been in love with Katniss. We know that Peeta does not value himself as a wanted person in the world. Peeta is doing everything he can to get Katniss home. And after Katniss sets loose the tracker jackers on the career pack, Peeta runs up to her and tells her to run away. And she cannot comprehend why. Katniss fundamentally does not understand a person who is kind, seemingly for the sake of being kind, despite the fact that that is exactly who she is to Prim. While Katniss is alone in the arena, and then later with Rue, she only briefly thinks of Peeta, wondering if he's alive. Then the announcement is made. The moment that it's announced that 2 tributes from the same district could win, Katniss does not hesitate in finding Peeta. And this is a fundamental and complete understanding of Katniss Everdeen from Haymitch. Because Katniss does not love Peeta. In fact, she might still be quite confused and angry at him, but she is first and foremost a protector. And if there's even the slightest chance that she can help him, that she can bring them both home, she's going to take it. And she finds him, camouflaged in the rocks and critically injured, and he tries to convince her that it's hopeless and to go off, but she won't listen because there's still a chance. And I think the moment where things really start to shift for Katniss and Peeta and their relationship is in the cave. By this point, Katniss also knows that Peeta is a natural performer. He is very good at putting on a show for the cameras, and he is in desperate need of medicine. And Katniss knows that the best way to get help is to get sponsors, and the best way to get sponsors is to play into the romance that Peeta created for the two of them. And Katniss will not let Peeta die. Whether or not because she thinks she still owes him for the bread, or if because she's just a genuinely good human being who cares about him. And so she plays up for the cameras and she acts. And she also thinks that Peeta might also be acting in this moment. And it's important to note the different ways that Katniss and Peeta view this situation. Peeta's feelings for Katniss are always at the forefront of who he is as a person, and I don't think he ever believed for a moment, even in that cave, that he was ever going to survive those games. I think he saw those moments with Katniss in the cave as a blessing from the universe he had never really gotten before, whereas Katniss is so focused on their survival and their survival alone that she doesn't even consider feelings. But I do think she does start to care for Peeta a lot, because she's not as good a performer and she's not as good an actor, and the lines between what's real and what's not are heavily blurred here, because they are both performing, but there's real feelings sprouting there and getting tangled up in it all. And then Cato is dead and it's just the two of them, and the moment with the berries comes and Katniss could go home. She could leave, she could see Prim again, she could win this thing, and she refuses. Before they went into the arena, Katniss and Peeta had a discussion about what they wanted most. And Katniss said that she wanted to keep Prim safe. She wanted to get home to Prim because that was the only thing she could really focus on, was her sister. Whereas Peeta said that he didn't want to become another part in their games. And it is only at this moment with the berries where Katniss truly understands Peeta. And I think it is really symbolic of Katniss fully understanding Peeta's worldview. And it's especially more prominent in the books because they actually take the berries and put them in their mouths. Katniss is fully ready to die. She is fully ready to give up the chance of going home, of ever seeing her family again, as long as it means that her and Peeta do not become another part of the games. Her worldview has always been survival and of getting from one moment to the next, and suddenly she's seeing a bigger picture she'd never seen before, and that's because of Peeta. And then they come out of the arena. And the way that each of them readapts to the real world is very different. They have both shared a harrowing, horrible experience together. They both understand each other's trauma and what the other went through. Peeta wants to remember every minute of it. Katniss wants to forget. And it's here that Katniss reverts back to her old ways in District 12. She still goes hunting despite having more than enough money to cater for herself and for Gale's family. She tries to resume a budding relationship with Gale, but it's forced and stilted. Whereas Peeta quickly knows that the games have changed everything. He moves into the Victor's village without his family and he starts taking care of Haymitch. But then they go on the victory tour, and this is where Katniss and Peeta start to actually become friends with each other. Katniss feels guilty for hurting Peeta in the games, but he sits her down and he tells her that she has nothing to be sorry for and nothing that she should ever feel she has to apologize for because she kept them alive. And we move on to the next phase, which I'm calling keeping the other alive. Before the victory tour, Katniss is visited by President Snow, who tells her that her stunt with the berries has caused uprisings in the districts, and that people are not believing her side of the romance. He threatens her family and her loved ones if Katniss cannot make him believe that she loves Peeta. So Katniss plays up the romance, but because her and Peeta have spoken beforehand and are aware of where the other person stands, they can become friends outside of this performance. Throughout the victory tour, Katniss and Peeta become closer, using each other for support. They sleep in the same bed quite often because they both suffer from night terrors. And it's only with Peeta where Katniss can actually sleep a good night's sleep. And here's a key difference with how Katniss deals with pain with Gale and with Peeta. With Gale, Katniss will always feel the pain. When Gale is whipped, Katniss takes on that pain and she suffers with him. But with Peeta, it's where Katniss can actually soothe her pain. And she views him as someone good and comfortable and worth saving. So when Snow tells Katniss that she failed, that she didn't manage to convince him, she immediately wants to run away to the woods like she did before the first games. Only now that involves Peeta. She won't leave him. And then the quarter quell is announced, and Katniss knows that she's going back into the arena, and she runs. Peeta, on the other hand, immediately goes to Haymitch and begs Haymitch to let him go back into the games to save Katniss. Because Peeta is not someone who matters, not in his own eyes, but Katniss is. And later, Katniss goes to Haymitch and tells him that they need to keep Peeta alive, that she knows that him and Peeta had a deal in the first games to get Katniss out, and that it's only fair for them to get Peeta out this time. All they want to do is to save the other person. Both Katniss and Peeta value each other's lives so much and their own lives so little that they are actively fighting against each other to keep the other alive. And I think that Peeta still believes that Katniss is acting, but this is no longer an act for Katniss, because Katniss is very good at showing her love for other people, but very bad at telling it, if that makes sense. And she views Peeta as everything good and kind in the world, and he views her as everything strong and right. And then in the quarter quell, they're met with experienced killers who know this world much better than they do, and all Katniss wants to do is be alone with Peeta, because everything is much bigger and much scarier, and Peeta is the only thing she knows to be solid and true. And then in the arena, Peeta hits the force field and dies, and every single one of Katniss's instincts kicks in. She becomes both protector and hunter as she tries to shield Peeta as well as fight off Finnick, and it's only after Peeta is revived that she realizes she's sobbing. And we know for certain that Katniss Everdeen cares deeply for Peeta Mellark. And they never leave each other's side in this arena. They stay close together and they even kiss, and it's only ever with Peeta that Katniss wants the kisses to lead to more. That she starts thinking beyond just basic survival and wanting more. Whether or not Peeta believes it was more than a performance, we never find out. Peeta is captured by the Capitol and Katniss is brought to District 13, and this loss is massive for the both of them. Katniss and Peeta had been using each other to soothe their pain, and now they were separated. And neither of them knew what the other was going through. Essentially, all they had were their nightmares. Katniss could assume that Peeta was being tortured by the Capitol. Peeta had no idea where Katniss was, or even if she was alive. They lose the ability to soothe pain, and so they feel it greatly. And we can see this when Katniss uses the pearl that Peeta gifted her. Rubbing her fingers over its smooth edges helps her ease her tension. And yet they're still trying to keep the other alive. Peeta warns the districts off from rebelling because he's still playing the game. He's still worried that Katniss will be punished or hurt. He even warns all of District 13 that a missile attack is coming for them, even knowing that he will be severely punished for this. And soon, Katniss realizes that Snow is using Peeta to punish her. Anything she does, any stand she takes against the Capitol, Peeta will pay for it. And when she realizes that, she can't perform for President Coin or for the rebellion anymore. That's when Haymitch and Coin realize they need to rescue Peeta and the other tributes, because Katniss will now not do anything if it means that Peeta will suffer for it. And then Peeta is hijacked and essentially becomes the last thing that he wanted, which was a piece in their games. And what's really significant here is that Snow makes Peeta believe that Katniss is an evil mutation. Snow could have made Peeta believe that Katniss was simply evil, but he specifically wanted Peeta to deliver this message to Katniss so Katniss would know exactly what Snow had turned Peeta into. She's a mutt, he calls her, but she's not. Peeta is. And Katniss cannot be around him when this occurs. For her, Peeta was everything good and kind in the world, and Snow took that away because he knew it would hurt Katniss. For her, Peeta is gone. That goodness, that kindness, it's gone. Katniss is essentially drowning in pain and in guilt because of this, and it's here where she decides to stop valuing her own life at all. It's here where she decides to go out of her way to assassinate President Snow. And then we reach the final stage, growing back together. What Snow underestimated when hijacking Peeta was that Peeta's love for Katniss was not based on the good things she did. It wasn't based on the memories he could twist. Peeta loved Katniss because he just loved her. And his mind is in a constant conflict of this girl he knows he loves, but also hates because she's done these horrible things. And so he loves her and he hates her at the same time. Also, by now, District 12 has been annihilated and Peeta's entire family has been killed. He has lost everyone, and now Snow has forced him to lose Katniss in his own mind. Peeta is entirely alone, and the only thing that seems to really feed him is his warped fury and anger at Katniss. And it's a testament to Peeta's upbringing and his childhood because he has always seen himself as someone unwanted and unloved, and those feelings have not been warped. He now just has confirmation of them. People are avoiding him. Friends that he once had, like Deli Cartwright, are scared of him. He becomes both the last thing he wanted and a confirmation of his own worst beliefs. Katniss blames herself and can't be around Peeta. She was the protector, the survivor, but she couldn't protect Peeta, and her own survival means less to her when she looks at the greater enemy and what it will take to bring down Snow. Katniss starts fighting the war the way Peeta wanted to in the first games. She even echoes his initial sentiments in his initial speech of being a pawn in someone's games to a Capitol supporter in District 2. And then the Star Squad is sent to the Capitol for the final assault. Katniss and Gale debate leaving and running off to support Katniss's plan of assassinating President Snow herself, but then Coin sends in Peeta. And Peeta is no longer the Peeta that Katniss loved, but he's also not the Peeta that only hates her. And he's warring with conflicting memories, and he's struggling to pull apart what's real and what's not. And while everyone offers to help him do that, it's Katniss who knows him best. Peeta is also more aware of himself to know that he is a danger to her, because despite the fact that he knows he loves her, he still has these impulses to kill her. And he begs her to kill him, to shoot him, to give him the Nightlock pill, to just let him die, and she will not do it. Because just like in the first games, there's still a chance he can live. Even if he's gone, even if he doesn't love her, she still values his life over her own safety. And as they're running through the Capitol and everyone's dying, Katniss still cannot leave Peeta. Because despite Gale describing it in a rather crude way, Katniss does need Peeta to survive. Because for her, Peeta represents the renewal of life and peace and light, and he soothes her pain rather than enhancing it. And for Peeta, this is a child who has been unwanted his whole life, and he's suddenly got this person who will do anything for him, who will fight for him, who wants him more than anyone. And they know and understand each other so well by this point. But Peeta does have to relearn Katniss, because he can't comprehend why she fights for him so much, why she just won't let him die when she's seemingly a person who is so focused on survival. He's essentially seeing her for the first time all over again. And after Katniss kills Coin, it's Peeta who knows that Katniss is immediately planning on taking her own life. And it's Peeta who stops her, because it took him months to learn about Katniss what most people never will. When Katniss loses Prim, she loses the only other person who was able to soothe her pain, and without anyone else home, she almost loses the will to live. But then Peeta comes home, and she feels herself again, and she wants to be clean and shower and be a part of the world once more. Because the person who knows her most, who she knows most, is home. Peeta comes home, and the first thing he does is plant Primrose. Thanks for watching. This has been the journey of Katniss Everdeen and Peeta Mellark. Be sure to like and subscribe and let me know who you want to see next, because I will be back for more relationship breakdowns of your favorite fictional characters.